Crystal said hello.
Hi, girls. I love you.
Can everybody hear us okay? Can you hear my mama?
It's Auntie Connie. Can you hear me?
They're saying they can hear you, Mom.
Okay.
We're a little bit early. I don't know if anybody else is going to be logging in soon, but how was your Christmas, Mama?
My Christmas, to be truthful, was sad. And I think it's the worst question that you could have asked me.
No crying, Consuelo.
It's not easy to be alone. How was your Christmas?
The same. We missed you.
It's so difficult because we have been used to being together always.
I know.
Next year we'll be together.
I know. Auntie Maria says she understands what you mean, but as long as we have each other, that's what's important.
That's true. Thank God for technology.
Thank God that you've been learning it pretty good, Mom.
Well, not really. I'm not a professional like Auntie Teresa, so today's video is my first. Okay, Teresa?
Okay, Mom. It's 7 o'clock, and I just want to let everybody know that we're excited to be able to have this little meeting with you. And I called it our little story time because we're here to listen from stories from you, and hopefully we could get Auntie Teresa on here, and Auntie Trini, and Auntie Mary, and more of our older aunts to be able to speak about what the life was living in Salt Creek and with Grandma and Grandpa, and so that we can all share our own stories and our own perspectives of being able to grow up from there. I would like you to share your story from your perspective about how it was growing up with your siblings and your parents and your grandparents. And hopefully, my plan is to be able to do this weekly and not just have it one-sided, but to be able to do a Zoom meeting with everybody who wants to participate in talking about our history and our culture and what our grandparents taught us and what our culture has taught us, because we're very proud of where we came from and who we are. So that's what the meeting is about tonight. If you want to stay logged in, I asked my mom to give us about 30-40 minutes of her time so that she can tell us about what it was growing up. And if you guys have any comments, go ahead and write them in there and I'll share them with her. She can't see the comments that are coming up, but I could read them to her. Everybody ready to hear some
Start
stories?
laughing. To start laughing. Okay, first of all, just let me share that The Granillo is a big family, and I'm proud of each and every one of you, whether you're a Granillo by blood or a Granillo by being married to in our bloodline. I'm going to get started with myself and to share what I can remember, and what I know. I am one of 16 children of the Granillos, and even though we were 16 children, my mom had 2 miscarriages, and in those miscarriages, one was a daughter, and the last miscarriage she had when Maria and Trini were planning their marriage, and like it was a double ceremony. Mama had a miscarriage at the grocery store. We had the grocery store at that time, and they were twins. They were twin boys. So I come from a family of 19. But I will talk about the 16. 10 girls, 6 boys. And right now I'm the last living Granillo through mom and dad's side. And I just had a brain fart.
You're not the last living. I think you're the oldest living.
Oldest living. I apologize.
And then on the 16 kids, is that 16 including grandpas?
Yeah.
Okay.
The 3 half siblings. The 3 oldest were my dad from his first wife. I'm going to change a little bit to talk about Grandpa and why we have those 3 siblings that were half. When Grandpa was married, he was married also to a lady whose name was Margarita, but she was Sanchez, Margarita Sanchez, and Dad was married with her. And when she left, she left with another man, and the other man, well, he was a Mexican also. He left his wife with 3 children. And we're assuming that when she left, she thought that because she left pregnant, she thought that the baby was the other man's, and his name was Juan. And I'll go ahead and say his last name. His last name was Rueda. But when she had the child and she had him in Nebraska, in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, she named him Rueda after the man that she had taken off with. But of all 16 children, all of my dad's 16 children, Juan is the one that looked the most like my dad. He walked like him. He was short in stature, and he had a large family like my dad did. When Juan died, he left 9 children, and he's the one that has had the most of my dad's siblings to have the most siblings. But nonetheless, we didn't get to know Juan until I believe it was 1964, and it was through his half sister that that she would go and visit over there, and she'd say, "He looks like somebody I know, and he looks like somebody I know." And then she talked to her mom about it, and she said, "Yeah, well, that's Uncle Granillo's son." So she did the honor of connecting my dad with his son, and it was a joyful time. My dad assumed that he had another child, but he didn't really know because he knew that the lady left pregnant. But anyway, I have contact with that family still in Mexico. I baptized 2 of the children, and they have children, and my second godchild, I named her Consuelo, and the first one Rosa Maria. And so Consuelo named one of her children Consuelo, and she named one of her children Consuelo. So my Consuelo name is already in Mexico. It's planted over there. It was my little Lucy next door, Angelica's daughter. She named her Consuelo too. But I'm already getting out of line. So anyway, my dad's three oldest children. Mary is the oldest, and she married Dave Ariano. They had, I believe, was 8 children. I'm not sure, and I should have counted and had my facts here, but I didn't think of it. Second one was Joe Granillo, and he has 3 children. And then my brother Juan, the one I just talked about, he left 9 children. And then followed my brother Gabby. And Gabby married Mary Louise Ramirez. And then followed my sister Elvira, and she married Alfonso Ayala. And then followed Conchi and Concepcion, and she first married Joel Sandoval, and then she married Lencho. And then after her, me, myself. And this is my second marriage, and I have 4 children. And I believe I have close to 30 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And then followed my sister Maria. She married Edward Herrera, and then she married Alvaro Loya. Then followed my sister Trini. She married Joe Rivera. And then followed my brother Saints Jr., married Mercedes. And then followed Jenny, my sister Jenny, and she was married to Juan Marquez. Then my sister Margie, she was married to Ralph Aragon. And then Albert, my brother Albert, was married to Juanita. And then there's Lawrence, and he is married to Sandy. And I'm lost. Okay, it was Junior, Jenny, Margie, Albert, Lawrence, and then Gloria. And Gloria was married to Chavez. What was his name? Carmelo Chavez. And then Teresa. And then she was married to I could see them. I could see their faces, but names are just running.
Manuel.
What was Auntie Teresa's husband's name?
Manuel.
Oh yeah, Manuel Villarreal. Okay, I don't know if I messed up or not, and I wasn't even counting. I don't know if any of you were counting or not.
Yeah.
But the Granillo family is a very large family.
I don't know if we missed anybody, so give me a shout out if we missed anyone.
I'm excited, and I'm going to stop right there, and then I'll go back. But I'm really excited, and I need to let you know that I'm really looking forward to a next family reunion, and I hope that you all out there are too, because being separated from the family this year, I think is actually going to bring us closer together.
Yeah.
But
no more commercials.
Pardon?
No more family reunion commercials. Let's talk about how Grandma and Grandpa met each other, fell in love, where they lived.
How Grandma and Grandpa fell in love?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know how they fell in love. All I know is that my mom, when my mom took off with my dad, my grandpa was upset, and he put he was pressing charges for my dad taking my mom because she was not quite 18. And when the police got him, they had a private meeting with the judge, and the judge told him that he couldn't annul the marriage because grandma just needed 3 more months to be 18, and he couldn't see going through all that. So my grandpa said, well, I want him in jail. I want him in jail. I want them both in jail. He was so mad. So they put him at the old jail that was located where the state hospital is in the south end of the hospital. And the men were on the second floor and the ladies were on the first floor. And they held him for 3 months. But my grandpa didn't know that at night, when visiting hours, when nobody would be there, the matron would go ahead and let my mom go and sleep with my dad in his cell. But nobody said anything about it. Well, they were married, and so 3 months later they let him out. And what was so funny was when they dropped down that jail, when they decided to condemn him because it was too old. We had barely started getting the fast foods in. I don't even remember who had a fast food, but my mom and my dad went and bought some hamburgers and pop, and they sat down in the truck across the street where they were throwing the building down. And that was so cute. They thought it was so special because that's where they had consumed their marriage. So that's funny. Grandma and Grandpa spent 3 months in jail. We need to remember that. And then Grandpa didn't forgive Mom for doing that until she had sayings. I think it was 7 years. Because my mom used to go over there to clean my grandma's house and help her with the washing and the ironing and everything. And then she'd go home before Grandpa would get out of work. And
You
one
say
day,
grandma and grandpa, but I need you to say their names.
oh, the Resendises, Grandma Resendez. So when my mom was getting ready to leave because she knew Grandpa Resendez was coming home, he met up with her in between the two houses. There was a sidewalk, and she was getting ready to go in. He was ready to go in, and he was pushing her and calling her down that she didn't have no business there. But at the same time, he was pulling on I think it was Saint, or was it Lawrence? Right now, I don't remember. I think it was Lawrence. Maybe it was Saints. See, I don't have my facts down, but anyway, so he was pulling on one and pushing on the other, and then they just started hugging and crying because it was 7 years. Anyway, that's how Mom and Dad, their life started, and that's through the Resendezes. You want to know how my grandma Resendez and my grandpa Resendez met? Can we go there?
Yeah, or go ahead and then we'll talk about how you guys were born and where were you born.
Okay. Grandma, I lived with my grandma for a whole year after my grandpa died. Grandpa Resendez died. And that was only because they didn't want grandma to be alone. And so I would go out with my boyfriend, which turned out to be my first husband. And then I would go over there afterwards, and grandma would always be sitting in the porch waiting for me to go over there. And she would have a cigarette. She was a big smoker. She would have a cigarette in one hand, and then she'd have her rosary on the other one. She'd be praying her rosary every night. You could see her in the porch with her cigarettes and her rosary. And then we would sit down, and she would start telling me.
Where was this house? Where did she live exactly?
The house is it's 1226 Rio Grande, and that's where Leroy works now, where he lives. And anyway, she said that her mom and her dad were killed during the revolution. Now, she couldn't put the blame on who did the killing or anything. All she said, she remembers that her and her sister were left orphans. And she said that one of her aunts raised them. But then it so happened that Pancho Villa had gone into the little city, or the little town, and they were stolen. Her and her sister were stolen by Pancho Villa's soldiers. Grandma said that the man that stole her was very, very mean, and my grandma was a beautiful lady. My grandma had blonde hair, and she had like blue-green eyes. Sometimes they were blue, sometimes they were green, but she was a beautiful woman. Her hair was curly, and she was petite and pretty, and this man would beat her up. If another man, if they were walking on the street, and if another man was looking at her, he'd beat her up right there in the street. And so even if she was looking down on the ground, it was not her fault. And men looked at her, but she said that he was so jealous. She had twins, two boys, by this man, and she would run away, but he would always find her. And she thought that maybe it was because when he went asking for this lady that looked like this and looked like that and had twins, the twins were the ones that would give her away because of them being twins. She said one day she used to sell gorditas in the corner. And she was in the corner selling gorditas, and people were buying them from her. And then all of a sudden, Pancho Villa was always around them, but all of a sudden, the soldados, the soldiers went into the city or the town, whatever it was, and Pancho Villa didn't get a chance to hide. He didn't get a chance to run anywhere, but he took a dive under her dress, under her skirt. She said they always used to wear long skirts then, and that he was under her skirt. And here the men from the soldiers were buying gorditas from her, and she was shaking. She said her legs were shaking so bad, but it was not as much as the soldiers were around her, but because Pancho Villa was under her dress, and she used to call him her coronel. Mi coronel, she said, was under my dress, and I could feel my legs shaking. She said her last gorditas, she even gave them away just to get the soldiers away from her, so she could start putting her things away so they won't be around her. When they finished and the soldiers left, then he came out from under her skirt, and he told her, you saved my life. What can I do for you? What can I do to show you my appreciation? And then she told him, I need to get away from this man. He beats me up. He's mean. He's cruel. And I don't want a life with him. And then he said, I'll take care of it. And then he went and he talked to the man that had stole her, and he said, so I'm letting her go free. I'm letting her go. And he said, over my dead body. And he said, well, I'll take care of that. And then he just decided that was the wrong thing for him to say. And then he said, I'll let her go, but I have to stay with one of the boys. She can't take them both. But she said he thought that he said that because a mother doesn't let her kids go. She said most mothers would have said, no, I'll stay better so I could stay with my kids. She said, but I was ready to kill him. She said, I hated him so much. He beat me up so much that I told him, okay, you stay with whichever one you want. And so he made Pancho Villa made arrangements to take my grandma away from where they were camping, where they lived. And he told the man that took grandma, he said, I want you to take her. I don't even want to know where you're going to take her, but I want you to take her and take her far away. And you can't come back, because if you come back, then he'll kill you to find out where you took her, so you can come back. And she said that was all done in secrecy. And he took my grandma, but he took her to Juarez. And grandma had to get a job to support herself and my uncle Juan. And she started crossing the Mexicans across the Rio Grande. And that was her job. And she said that they would pay her and she would cross them. She was a good swimmer. She learned very young how to swim and everything. And there was some time that it would be raining so hard they used to have to camp under the trees until it was time, but she knew when she could cross them. And she said one day a group of boys landed there, and the river was too high, and she said, "I can't cross you." She says, "Because uh, if it gets the water gets too high, we could drown. I'm a good swimmer, but if somebody takes me down, they take me down with them." So they stood, she said, for 2 days, and then finally, but during the night, one of the boys would talk to her, and they would laugh and until morning. And then anyway, she said then when she crossed him, one at a time she crossed him, and then 2 days later, one of the boys came back, and she laughed and she says, "Oh, they caught you." She says, "And they send you back." She says, "No, they didn't catch me. I came back." He said, "But I came back for you and your son." And she said during the night she had told him what had happened to her in Durango, and so that's how she met my grandpa, Resendez, and he brought her to the United States, and he had her all over Texas and in New Mexico and here in Colorado, and they were together till he died at the CFNA.
So right now, I just want to let everybody know who she's talking about. She's talking about Maria Teresa Duñez, and she was born in Lerdo, Durango, Mexico, and her grandpa, Trinidad Resendes, who was from Mexico City. And my mom had spoke to me about these stories a while back, and it was amazing that we were able to go back on Ancestry, and I was able to find documentation about her from her baptism and also her birth certificate. And in Mexico, they not only give birth certificates, but they register the child. And her registry was actually done by a great aunt of hers, and her great aunt registered her and her sister and her little brother in that registry, and mentions how her father and her mother had died. And so it surprises me to be able to hear the stories that were told to my mom and down to me, and then be able to get documentation that the story is true, that her parents were killed during the revolution and she was being raised by a great aunt. And it did mention that her sister and her brother did end up dying in Durango. And so through paperwork, we get to see her travel to Juarez and to El Paso. And I think one of the things that I've mentioned before is about how strong the women are in our family, how strong my mom is in her character, and how strong Grandma Granillo was in her character, but she got it from her mother, Maria Teresa, who not only was an orphan at a very early age, but went through a difficult time in her life, and a bad marriage and a bad relationship. I don't know if she was married to this man and having to leave a child behind. During that revolution time, I don't know if you've ever read stories about Adelitas, where they were actually women soldiers and they carried guns. They took care of the men, the food or medicine, taking care of the wounded. And so she did that. And then all of a sudden she begins doing a man's job of crossing people through a river. And I'm not a very good swimmer, so I don't think I could carry people through a river, a very fast river. But she was doing a man's job. It just shows the tenacity and the courage inside of her to want to push forward and keep going, and not only leave a bad situation, but go in search for that dream that we all have. And that's where we get it from. It's passed down through our DNA, the character that we have as women in our family. And I see that in so many of us. And it's kind of hard for our husbands to accept, but that's who we are because how far back in the lineage, and heaven knows what her parents went through, but I have been able to go back and research her, and it's amazing to see that she was a female soldier and she did a man's job of being a coyote and swimming people across, and then she found the love of her life while she was doing that work and was able to finally settle down here in Pueblo, Colorado, and raise her family. If you have any questions or comments or have any additions to the stories, just put them in the comment. Right now, Mom Sante said hello. And Teresa says she loves your necklace. Helika says, that's my bloodline. And so what do you think? Her name was Maria Teresa Atuñez, and she's actually buried with her husband, Trinidad Resendes, at Imperial Cemetery next to Grandma and Grandpa Neo. Anything that I missed, Mom?
Grandpa Trinidad Resendes, his mom's name was Segovia. And he was born in Mexico City, but his mom was born in France, which would have been my great grandma, and his father was born in Spain. So we have lineage coming from Spain and from France through Grandpa Resendes.
And one of the amazing things going through Ancestry is that we're able to see that Grandpa Resendes' family, they all spell their last names with IZ, which I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but it's more Spanish. And so a lot of times through immigration process, the immigration agent would write down the name as they sounded it to be, and so it was changed to Easy. But even his family that we know in Texas, and we got to meet for the family reunion in his family back in Mexico City, they spell their last names with Resendiz, with IZ. So that's another little story there. Sharon wants to know, what about the child she left behind? Did they ever reunite?
No, they had no contact after she went to Juarez, but I'm assuming, I'm assuming that the man's name that fathered the twins, that his last name was Valerio. And the reason I'm assuming that his name was Valerio, because my Uncle John sometimes would change, it was a lot of times, he would change his name. He would say that he was not Resendes, his name was John Valerio. And that's why I'm assuming that was the man's name, Valerio, or why would he be using that name?
And right now, cousin Tom Resendes submitted DNA, and so I'm trying to see if we get any matches to find that brother that was left behind. I think that's a secret that I want to be able to find. I'm so motivated. It's one of my dreams is to be able to see if we can find a link to the family that was left in Mexico, to that brother, and be able to finally reunite Grandma Maria Teresa's Resendes' twin boys, or at least their families. They can't, the boys won't, but at least the families would be able to meet each other. And we would be able to get to know what happened to him and his family. Will you give us some detail? You talk a lot about the physical features of your grandpa Resendes and your grandma Maria Teresa Resendes. I know there was a scar, and want to tell us about that?
Actually, what happened with my grandpa Resendes is he used to work in the coal mines in Trinidad. He did whatever any job he could get, but there was a time that he was able to get into the coal mines, and there was an accident where the roofing or the ceiling of the cave caved in, and several of the men were still in there, and so they had to dig them out. And when he was in there, he happened to fall sitting down, and his head went between his knees. So there was oxygen left there that he was able to breathe. He's the only one that came out alive, but they were digging, and some were using the pitchforks, and they did hit his back. And so he did have scars from that accident. Now, that was Grandpa Resendez. You were talking about Grandpa Granillo, huh?
No, Grandpa Resendez. You said, did he have colored eyes?
Grandpa Resendez just had light brown eyes, but he was a tall man, light complected. Um, he was a macho man. I mean, I was deathly scared of my grandpa because he had this voice that was so aggressive. And sometimes I would cry over nothing. If he talked to me, I would just start crying. But I think more of the family was afraid of Grandpa than Grandma. Grandma was silly, like my sister Maria. Grandma, we would go down Grandma's, and she would be listening to the music in the kitchen. She would be making soup or corn tortillas or something, and she would lift her little dress up and she would start dancing with the music, and that's the way Maria was. She would be funny in that way. So my sister Maria took over Grandma's silliness.
Did you get to visit your Grandpa Resendez's family in Mexico City?
Yes, I did. I went with my mom, my dad to Mexico City, and I met my grandpa's brother Luis, and he was entirely different than my grandpa. He was shorter and darker, and he came visit us here in the United States once, and they were considered high class people. You know, they had a place and they had beautiful furniture, and they were a beautiful family. My grandpa Resendez, there was three in his family. It was my grandpa Trinidad, and then it was my tío Luis, and then they had a sister named Concepcion, Concha.
Okay. And how about, we don't know too much about Maria Teresa's family, but what have you been able to learn recently about her and her family?
Oh, see, I threw another brain fart. Um, I remembered that we used to go to Avondale, and we would visit Tia Natividad Villegas, and she was my grandma's first cousin. So right now, matter of fact, just today, 2 weeks ago, I was able to contact the deacon from Avondale. His name is Paul Villegas, and he's a deacon at the church. And I was able to talk to him, and I was able to talk to Tia Josefina, and she's the oldest one left right now, but she was married to a Villegas. But the deacon connected me with, I can't think of her first name. Her last name is, I can't think of, Solano. And she is going to connect me to her cousin that has been doing a family tree, and he's been visiting New Mexico, and he's gone to California, and he's gone to different places because they're like us. We're hungry to find out who we are. So next week I'll be able to talk to him, and I understand they've got pictures and they've got a lot of information. So we have another link, and I believe my tia Nati's mother is or her sister is the aunt that raised my grandma. So so we're hoping and praying that we can do that connection. And then I did do some connection with the Granillos in California. and they came to visit here several times, but we lost all connection altogether. And I was finally able to get some information from a funeral obituary on one of the cousins that died, and from there I sent letters, and I emailed, and I was finally able to get somebody to call me and talk to me, and
Okay,
they're our family.
Mom, you jumped to the other side of the family.
I'm sorry.
So right now I have a message from Cecilia Soto, and she says Natividad Villegas was her great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I think the one you spoke to today is her name Joanne Solano.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the Solanos out of Avondale, right? And so what, like my mom said, is we're thinking that Natividad Villegas was Maria Teresa's first cousin. And since we have registry that Maria Teresa was registered by her great aunt because her parents were killed during the revolution, that it was probably Natividad Villegas' mother that also raised Maria Teresa and her sister and her brother, but we're not too sure about that until we get to speak to more people on that side of the family. But I think it's amazing to know that with Evandale being so small, there's so many of them there that are related to us. So I was glad to hear that. And we know the Solanos out of Evandale, and they spoke a little bit about the Autobees also being part of the family. And it's just like a little trail here and there, because also when we were doing the interviews out of Salt Creek, there was a lady there that was from also the same little town that Maria Teresa's from, but I don't know if there's a connection of family there. I know a lot of times when people start migrating, they end up migrating to the same town where they already have relatives living there, because their relatives are helping them get to where they are, and that's how they help each other, is to get family down here. And so I'm excited to get more information about that. And actually my mom has some breaking information that she was able to get within the last few weeks out of the family out of California, of the Granillos, and also another relative that we hadn't heard from in a long time. She's been able to make contact, and we're hoping to be able to get him onto a Zoom meeting to talk to the family also. Cecilia Soto that says that it's Natividad and Domingo Villegas. And so Carolyn just got on also. Carolyn just started watching, and it's just a story time, Carolyn, that we'd like to share. We have my mama, and I try to pull out as much memory and information out of her. And it's amazing because she remembers all the old stuff. She just don't remember what she had for breakfast this morning. And so I thought this would be nice and be able to record it and have it as part of our history, to learn about our family and our culture. Mom, do you remember what Grandpa Resendez died of?
Grandpa Resendez died from a massive heart attack. What happened is Grandma Resendez was in the hospital, and they were going to do surgery on like a tumor or something in her stomach. And he went to work. It seems like it was just yesterday. I saw him driving in front of the house, looking at all of us. Really
What was
sad.
he driving?
Huh?
What was he driving?
He was driving a green. I don't remember if it was a Dodge or not, but he went to work and had a massive heart attack, and they didn't do surgery on my grandma, and my grandma died. What did my grandma die of? My grandma just didn't want to live anymore. My grandma was just in bed, and she didn't want to eat. She didn't want to drink. She was diabetic. And one morning she sat up on the edge of the bed, and she was smacking her lips, I remember. And Carmen had taken her a little bowl of soup and oatmeal, I think it was. And she was smacking her lips, and then she said, "No, I'm not hungry anymore. Your grandpa just brought me something to eat." And grandpa had already been dead a whole year. And we just looked at her and didn't say nothing. But then when she laid back down, then a couple of days later, she died. She didn't eat. because she said Grandpa had fed her, but she had no will to live. Grandpa
Um,
Grandpa was 17 years younger than my grandma. So she was, when he returned to go and bring her, she hesitated because he was a young man to her. He was, and she didn't want to, but he persuaded her, like these Mexicans that are so stubborn.
How many children did they have? Can you name them?
There was 5 girls and 2 boys, the same as in the Granillos, 5 girls and 2 boys. There was my Uncle John that was the oldest, and then there was my Uncle Louis. Then it was my Aunt Carmen, there was my Aunt Nellie, there was my Uncle Louis, my Aunt Teresa, and my Aunt Vera. My Aunt Teresa was the youngest. My Uncle John was the oldest.
Did they always live on Rio Grande and he always worked at the CFNI?
Grandpa worked in the fields the majority of his life, and I think that I gave you a letter. I think you have a letter from Grandpa and Grandpa Granillo and Grandpa Macias, of letters of when they were working at the CFNI, when they got their jobs.
It looks like Trinidad Resendez died in 1960. I don't have the exact date, I could look for it. And your grandma, Maria Teresa, died in 1961.
Yeah, she lived a year.
What did she do? You mentioned about, what did she do at home? What?
Grandma, one of her traits was, besides being a housewife, she didn't work outside of the home other than she did some healing with herbs.
She did like medicine, herbal medicine.
Herbal medicines.
That's what she did, like for the community or her neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share about that side of the family, or what you could think about today? I think we want to keep our focus on the Resendez and that line. And the next time we meet, hopefully next week, we can go ahead and speak about Grandpa Granillo and his genealogy. Does anybody have any other questions? Do you have anything else you want to share about that, Mom?
I was just kind of trying to think of Grandma.
Do you remember what kind of food she liked to cook? Did they have animals? What was her house like?
You know what, Grandma, every morning, I don't know why, I think I would go crazy if she would go and kill one of the chickens in the backyard. Or when Grandpa was alive, oh my God, he had me try to help him kill a chicken, but Grandma would just get it and from the neck and kill it, but Grandpa would use an axe. But Grandpa would tell me, here, you hold the little head right here and I'll put my foot on his wings and then I'll chop his head down. But every time he was going to chop it, I would leave go of the head because the chicken would move his little brains and I'd say, oh my God, he's going to chop my hand off. The first time, after the third time that I let the chicken's head go, he said, if you leave that chicken head go, I'm going to chop your head off. So I hung on to his head so he could kill the chicken. But Grandma made fresh chicken soup every day, and people would go visit. People would go visit just to eat her chicken soup. But to her, chicken soup was the strength of a person. If you ate chicken soup, you would be healthy. So she believed in her chicken soup, and she would put in her potatoes, her carrots, her calabacitas in there, and it was so good. But I don't think that I could eat chicken soup every day. She made the best tamales in town. During Christmas, she used to sell tamales to the Alamo drugstore. That's Ray Aguilera's family. And she would sell them like 100 dozens of tamales during the Christmas. And then the Aguileras would give them away to their best clients and to the doctors. So they loved Grandma's tamales. Grandma would make a nacimiento every year. And people would just show up and do the whole yards, have tamales, have the menudo, have atole. It was beautiful.
What did she like to cook? What was her favorite music? Did they smoke?
Grandma used to smoke. I tell you, she used to sit on the porch and smoke a cigarette with one hand and pray the rosary with the other hand. I don't remember seeing Grandpa smoke. Grandma cooked everything you could think of. She would make the homemade corn tortillas. She would make tamales. She would make mole.
Margie said that she had the best chicken mullet ever.
Grandma Resendez?
Yeah.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I was told about a month or so ago that Louis Resendez, I think it was Louis, that he is selling mole, and he named it Grandma Resendez's mole.
Oh.
That's the name that he put on the label.
Yeah.
Grandma Resendez mole.
Angelica says, what in Grandma Neil reminds Mom of great Grandma Resendez?
What of my mom?
Yeah.
Reminds me of Grandma Resendez?
Yeah. Was there any similarities in them?
I don't really recall, because as we were growing up, my mama used to spend so much time down my grandma's that my brother Gabby and Vito and Conchi would do the meals. Gabby used to do the meals. So my mom wasn't the best cook. No, my mom didn't make good tamales and she didn't make good tortillas. But to say Grandma's cooking, Grandma Resendez is cooking.
I think Grandma Granillo's mole was good too.
Yeah.
Haven't been able, I think Josefina does it pretty good.
Well, Josefina's tamales taste as good as Grandma Granillo's.
Yeah, and her mole too. I'm gonna ask one more time if there's any questions from everybody that's watching, or maybe you have questions for future meetings. I'm glad that Stephanie's on here. I wanted to let her know if we can try to get a meeting with my mom and Auntie Teresa and Auntie Trini and Auntie Margie, or each one of them by themselves. We're all hungry to know more about them. Auntie Teresa says that Grandpa made the tamales. He did.
He
was
made
the
the
last-
chicharrones, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if anybody knows, it would be Auntie Teresa who did what, because I was never, well, I hardly was ever there to help. My job was to get the orders because I used to work. So I would get the orders for them and then separate the different sections of town, and different people would go to different sections. And so my job made it easy for them, but they did the hard job.
Yeah, and Deanna said that that was Grandpa's recipe also. And one of the things that Cassie said is that Uncle Gabby's food was really good. So what you're saying today is that Uncle Gabby started learning early in the kitchen.
Well, to tell you the truth, when Uncle Gabby used to go to Corwin School, him and two other guys, and I don't know who the two other guys were the first ones to ever sign up for cooking classes. Yeah, Gabby and two of his friends. Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
How about, we're gonna go ahead and close it up. Angelica and Deanna says they would just eat the masa. I can say I did that too. We'll close it up with can you give us a short story about where you guys were born? I thought that was very interesting. Who was born at home? Who was born at the hospital? Who helped you?
Okay, in 1943, we used to live, well, I'll say the Granillos, which was my mom, my dad, Joey, Mary, Vito, Gabby, Vito, and Conchi. They lived with my grandma Granillo. I didn't know my grandma Granillo. She died in August and I was born in September of 1944. But there was like a little vecindad right there on Palo Alto, where across from where Junior Solis had his house, where they had their house. Across from them, my mom, my dad, and them lived on the facing the house. They lived on the right side, and then Grandma lived in the middle, and then my Aunt Lupe and Betty and them lived on the other side. And then in 1943, my dad bought the house on Roselawn. And then I was born, I was the first one born there, and that was in 1944. So from me down, there was me, Lara, Trini, Junior, Jenny, Margie, Albert, and Lawrence. Let's see, Albert and Lawrence were born on Rio Grande, I think. But we had a midwife go in there and help my mom with us on Roselawn, and that was Rachel, cousin Rachel Resendez's grandma. She was the midwife. She is the one that would go and
Do you
help
remember
my
her
mom.
name?
Nieves Rodriguez. La señora Nieves Rodriguez. And she never had any problems with any of my mom's deliveries, but the hardest ones were Gloria and Teresa, and they were the only two that were born at Parkview Hospital. And my mom had a hard time with them, maybe because she was afraid, and I don't know. There's so many
Auntie
reasons.
Teresa says that she was born at the hospital in Gloria and Lawrence.
Or Lawrence too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And do you know Auntie Teresa or Mom where Uncle Saints was born? Carolyn's asking.
What's that?
Where was Uncle Saints born? Carolyn was asking.
I'm assuming he was born in Salt Creek.
Yeah, at home.
At home.
Yeah.
Uncle Santos. I'll try to figure that out for you, Carolyn, because I want to figure out when we moved from Salt Creek to Rio Grande.
Auntie Teresa says he was born in Salt Creek also.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you spoke about the grocery store, but can you tell us about the grocery store?
Okay. I graduated in 1962, and in November, I believe it's 62. My dad had the opportunity of leasing the De Leon grocery store, so we were there for a couple of years. And during that time, I believe that's when Trini and Maria got married, because we were at the grocery store.
And the De Leon grocery store, where was that?
Right across the street of the house on Roselawn.
It was a blue building before they tore it down, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, probably.
Auntie Margie says that Uncle Saints was born in Salt Creek.
Uncle Saints was in Salt Creek.
Yeah, and then Sante says the older ones were born at the house on Roselawn, or where were the oldest ones born?
They were born right there on El Paso. I mean, on Palo Alto.
Oh, where you were saying
In
that
Saco.
it was this and that. And I think
Yeah.
that's where they have that park. What is the
Yeah.
park called? The Ariano Park?
Johnny Ariano Park.
Yeah, so it's like I think it's a vacant land right now. We seen it?
Yeah. In front of the Ramirez's. the Ramirez's live in the back, and then the front is empty.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're gonna go ahead and close up this session, and if anybody has any more questions, just message me or message my mom. She's on Messenger, and we can go ahead and talk next week about a little bit more of family history. I hope this gives you guys a little bit more information and history about where you come from, and it's so interesting to be able to go back and remember our grandparents and their parents, and so I'm glad to do this. And Deanna said thank you.
No, thank you for taking the time to listen to this old lady.
Crystal said thank you. And Sharon also said thank you. I'm hoping to do this next Thursday. If you guys want to put some time in, or let me know what time works good for you guys. Cassie said thank you. Sante said thank you, Auntie. And I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. Thank you, Mom, and you take care of yourself. Becky said thank you. Cassie said she loves you more. And I just hope that we can go ahead and make plans for the rest of our aunts and uncles and even our cousins. If you have stories we'd like to reminisce about, I went ahead and got this Zoom service so that we can all get in touch and remember our past and our history and the love that we had. Jerry said thank you, and Teresa said she loves you more, Mom.
I thank you all for loving me.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say before we close up?
I would just like for you to finalize with the prayer, thanking the good Lord for today's session, because we need to continue. We need to make plans. We need to get together. This has given us a chance to make us realize how much we need each other and how much we miss each other and how much we love each other. And I think it's worth getting together and getting ready for another reunion, for new surprises.
And you don't want to say the prayer?
Hita I'm so used to praying in Spanish.
Go ahead.
Señor Padre nuestro, te damos gracias, mi Rey. Te damos gracias por la oportunidad de estar aquí contigo, Señor. Gracias por todo lo que has hecho y todo lo que vas a hacer por nosotros, Señor. Te pedimos, Señor, con todo el corazón, Señor, que ya destruyes el virus que anda destruyendo tanta gente inocente, Señor. Te damos gracias, te amamos, Señor, te alabamos, Señor, te damos gracias, Señor. Te necesitamos, mi Rey. Gracias, Señor, por lo que nos has dado, y te pedimos, Señor, que nos des sabiduría, Señor, para poder seguir adelante, Señor. Gracias por el amor que nos tienes, Señor, y todo lo que te pido, Señor, te lo pido en el nombre de Cristo Jesús. Amén.
Amen. And for all my cousins out there that didn't learn Spanish, it's not too late to start to learn. It's part of your history. I want to thank everybody. I bless you all in the name of Jesus. I pray that you all stay safe and healthy. Stephanie says that her mom appreciates keeping the Granillo Resendez history alive. And Anna says, thank you for your time, that it was great. I pray for each and every one of you and your families that stay together. I think what my mom said is very true, that this COVID situation has made us realize that family is very important and it's very much a blessing. And so until next time, good night. God bless each and every one of you. Stay healthy, stay safe. Love you all.
Love you.
Good night.
I love you. I love you. I love you.